Years from now, my mother would tell people she never saw it coming. But she did. She just never thought I'd be the one holding the yardstick. The real one. The one that had been sitting in the back of my junk drawer since the day my grandfather died, its brass edge still sharp enough to cut if you weren't careful. She'd spent my whole life measuring me against my sister, against my brother, against some ghost she called potential, and I'd always come up an inch short. So no, I didn't see it coming either, the exact moment I stopped trying to measure up and decided to measure back. It started the way these things always do, with a phone call I'd been dreading since Halloween. I was on my back porch, a cup of coffee going cold on the arm of my Adirondack chair, the November sky hanging low and gray as dirty dishwater. Across the alley, some neighbor was running a leaf blower, that hollow whine cutting through everything, and the air tasted like wet wood and gasoline. My phone buzzed once, a text from my sister, Mallory. No preamble. No emoji. Mom and I talked. It's best if you don't come Thursday. We all want a peaceful holiday, and frankly, after last year, you'll just ruin it. We're not doing the drama. Don't make this a thing. I read it 3 times, the leaf blower droning on like a dentist's drill. Last year, the drama had been me asking our father why he'd sold the cabin on Priest Lake without telling me, the only place I ever felt close to our grandfather. I hadn't yelled. I just asked, fork resting on my plate, green bean casserole untouched. Mallory had rolled her eyes, my mother had smoothed her napkin, and my father had said, "We didn't think you'd care. You never use it." Like I was a stranger who'd wandered in from the street. That was the drama. A question. A fork. An honest inheritance of silence. I thumbed open the family group chat. Nothing. No one had typed a word in my defense. No one had said, "Hey, that's harsh." No one had sent a private message. They'd straight up cold-shouldered me, a clean excision, like I was a tumor they'd finally managed to cut out. I set my phone down on the arm of the chair, screen up, watching the text just sit there, bright and permanent. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice, then stopped. My coffee had a skin on top, that shimmering, oily film. I stared at it for maybe 10 minutes, the cold seeping through my jeans, before I went inside. My place is small, a 1-bedroom rental over in the South Perry district, but I've always kept it quiet, clean, deliberately light on clutter. The only thing that's ever felt heavy in there was the junk drawer in the kitchen. Everyone's got one. A graveyard of dead batteries, twist ties, soy sauce packets from 3 moves ago. But at the very back of mine, wrapped in an old linen napkin, was my grandfather's ruler. He'd been a Finnish carpenter before his hands gave out, and he carried that thing everywhere, a genuine, no-bullshit tool made of maple, a brass edge set into one side. He used it to scribe lines, check for level, and on 2 occasions I could remember, deliver a sharp, stinging crack to my palm when I'd lied about something significant. The last time I saw him alive, in the sterile beige of his living room, he'd pressed it into my hand. His knuckles were swollen, the skin papery. "You know how to measure true," he'd said. "That's the only thing in this family that don't lie." I took it home. I didn't know why. Until now. I unwrapped the napkin. The wood was still satin smooth, a few faint pencil marks near the numbers, and the brass edge caught the kitchen light like a sliver of old gold. Holding it, I felt a click in my chest, not a release, not peace, but the clean, cold mechanism of a decision slotting into place. 2 years ago, 3 weeks before my grandfather died, I'd driven him to a legal office downtown. He hadn't said much, just that he wanted to square a few things. I waited in the car, the defroster wheezing, watching the neon sign for a bail bonds place flicker across the street. When he came back out, he handed me a sealed manila envelope. "Hide this. And don't you open it unless the rest of them try to bury what's real." I'd tucked it under the spare tire in my trunk and, if I'm being honest, I'd half forgotten about it until the afternoon of the funeral, when my father produced a will that suddenly gave him the house, the property, the money, and left Mallory my grandfather's coin collection. I got a watch that didn't run. No envelope. No mention of it. I'd opened that manila envelope that night, hands trembling on my bathroom floor, and I'd read an affidavit, notarized and sworn, alongside a handwritten letter and a USB drive. It was a bomb. A quiet, legal, utterly devastating bomb. The affidavit was from a woman named Gloria Travers, a paralegal who'd worked at the law office and witnessed my grandfather's true intent. It stated that the will my father had presented was a forgery, that my grandfather had been pressured, coerced, during a moment of failing health, and that the genuine last will and testament had been replaced with a fraudulent version that cut me out completely. The USB drive held a video, shot on my grandfather's own shaky camcorder, in which he looked straight into the lens and said, "My son thinks I'm just a confused old man. But I know what he's doing. The real will leaves everything to my granddaughter. Everything. She's the only one who ever measured up." I had watched it once, closed the laptop, and thrown up in the sink. Then I'd buried it all in the back of my closet, behind a box of tax returns, and I'd spent 2 years trying to convince myself I could stomach the injustice. For the sake of peace. For the sake of a family that had just sent me a text saying I'd ruin their holiday. If you've ever watched a family hand everything to the wrong person while measuring your worth in inches and ounces, stay with me. Drop a comment and tell me what you would do with that kind of fire in your hands. I set the ruler down on my kitchen table, parallel to the edge, and I opened my laptop. The printer whirred to life for the first time in months, spitting out 4 copies of the affidavit, each page crisp and accusatory in the unromantic light of my kitchen. I wrote a short note, the same for all of them. "You have until midnight to make this right. At 8 a.m. tomorrow, I file it with the probate court. Then we can all measure what's real." I folded each set neatly, slid them into 4 certified mail envelopes, and addressed them to my mother, my father, Mallory, and my brother, Derek. The post office was nearly empty, just a tired clerk with holly sprig earrings who didn't blink at my stack of envelopes. I paid the extra for the tracking, watched her slide them one by one into the bin, and walked back out into the cold, the receipt crinkling in my coat pocket. I didn't go home immediately. I drove to a diner out on the highway, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that stays hot for hours because it's mostly steam and bitterness. I ordered a slice of pecan pie. I ate it slowly, fork scraping the plate, and I did not check my phone. For an hour, I was nothing but a woman eating pie in the dim hum of a roadside diner, the taste of corn syrup and cold butter coating my tongue. Then I looked at the screen. 68 missed calls. The texts were a cascade of capitals and question marks, starting with Mallory's, "What the hell is this?" and spiraling into my mother's pleading, my brother's threats, my father's silence that somehow spoke louder than all of it. I didn't answer. I paid my check, left a $5 tip on a $7 pie, and drove home through streets glazed with the first thin frost of the season. By midnight, I was sitting in my dark living room, the only light a yellow wedge spilling from the kitchen, the ruler laid across my lap like a ceremonial blade. I heard the first car pull up around 11:40, the crunch of tires on gravel, a door slam, then another. Voices, sharp and frantic, cutting the night air. Footsteps clattered up my porch steps. The pounding started, flat palms, a fist, the door rattling in its frame. I heard my mother's voice, high and wet with tears. "Please, baby, please don't do this. We can talk. We can fix it." Mallory screamed my name, her voice cracking at the edges, calling me a monster, calling me a bitter, twisted, vindictive little. I stopped listening. My brother's deeper register rolled through the wood. "Just open the door. We're sorry. We'll change it, we swear. Just don't file that thing." I stood up, the ruler firm in my right hand, its brass edge cool against my thigh. I walked slowly across the floor, the old boards groaning under my weight, until I was inches from the door. I could see their shadows through the frosted glass, shapeless and desperate, a single writhing mass of panic. I did not unlock it. Not yet. First, I was going to make them say it all again, every single broken promise, every backhanded apology, while I listened from the other side of the wood, measuring every last word. I let them knock until their knuckles went raw. Through the frosted glass, I watched their shadows shift and merge, a single panicked organism gasping on my porch. My mother was crying now, those wet, Hitching sobs I'd heard 100 times before at funerals, during arguments, whenever she needed the room to bend toward her. Mallory had stopped screaming and started pacing, her heels clicking in angry staccato against the wood. Derek just kept repeating, "Please, just open the door. We can fix this," like a prayer he didn't believe in. And my father? He stood apart, a dark pillar of silence, and I knew without seeing that his jaw was clenched, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of that same wool coat he'd worn to my grandfather's funeral. The coat he'd been wearing when he'd handed me the broken watch and called it a legacy. I let them knock for another 2 minutes. Not out of cruelty, or not just cruelty, but because I wanted the cold to sink in. I wanted the November wind to bite their cheeks and numb their fingers. I wanted them to feel, even for a moment, what it was like to be locked out of warmth. Then I opened the door. The four of them stumbled back like I'd swung a floodlight in their faces. My mother's mascara had already begun its slow migration south, 2 grayish tracks cutting through her foundation. She reached for me, both hands extended, palms up, the universal posture of supplication. Oh, thank God. Baby, we were so scared. We were so scared. Behind her, Mallory's face was a mask of fury barely restrained, her lips pressed into a bloodless line. Derek wouldn't meet my eyes. And my father, he just stared at the ruler in my hand, his brow furrowing, a flicker of something dark and confused passing behind his pupils. He recognized it. Of course he did. He'd watched his own father carry it for 30 years. "You want to come inside?" I asked, my voice flat as a 2x4. They shuffled in like condemned prisoners, shoulders hunched, coats still buttoned to their chins. My living room had never felt smaller. My mother perched on the edge of my thrift store couch, tissues already materializing from her purse. Mallory stood by the window, arms crossed, her back to all of us. Derek hovered near the kitchen, a man who'd spent his whole life hovering near exits. And my father remained standing in the center of the room, taking up space he'd never earned, the way he always had. "You can't file that thing," he said. "No preamble. No apology. Straight to the demand. Whatever your grandfather told you, whatever he put in that video, he wasn't in his right mind. He was old. He was confused. You know that." I didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen table and set the ruler down, its brass edge catching the overhead light. Then I pulled out a chair, sat, and folded my hands on the scarred oak surface. The smell of burnt coffee still hung in the air from that morning, bitter and stale. "Gloria Travers," I said quietly. She was there. She witnessed everything. The real will. The coercion. The forgery. I watched my father's face drain of color, a slow, satisfying erosion. She's still alive. Still has her notary seal. Still willing to testify. Mallory whipped around from the window, her composure finally cracking. "Do you have any idea what this would do to us? To the family? The house would go into probate. The money would be frozen. Mom and Dad would lose everything. Everything. You'd be destroying 4 lives just to prove some petty little point about not being invited to dinner." "It's not about the dinner," I said. My voice stayed low, calm, the kind of calm that terrifies people who are used to winning arguments with volume. It was never about the dinner. It was about the cabin, the coin collection, the watch that didn't work. It was about 20 years of sitting at that table while every single one of you decided I was less important, less reliable, less worthy of the truth. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it creaked. "Grandpa measured true. That's what he told me. And you forged him into a lie." My mother let out a sound I'd never heard before, a guttural, wounded keen that came from somewhere deeper than performance. She slid off the couch and onto her knees on my threadbare rug, her composure abandoned like a broken umbrella in a storm. I know we did. I know we failed you. But please don't do this. We'll change the will. We'll sell the house and split it. Whatever you want. Just don't file the affidavit. Don't bring this to court." I looked at her for a long time. The woman who'd raised me, or claimed to, with her pearls and her posture and her smile she usually saved for church. She was a portrait of ruin, tears dripping onto my floor, and for one soft, treacherous moment, I felt the pull. The gravitational force of a lifetime of conditioning. Forgive. Forget. Keep the peace. And then I remembered the text. She'll ruin the holiday. I already filed it, I said. The room went absolutely still. Even my mother stopped crying, her breath catching in her throat like a snagged zipper. What? My father's voice cracked on the single syllable, the first honest sound I'd heard him make in years. This morning, at 8 a.m., before you ever got my envelope. The probate court has everything, the affidavit, the video, the real will. There's no undoing it. I leaned back in my chair, the wood groaning beneath me. You all came here thinking you could beg me into silence. But you were already too late. You've been too late for 2 years. I just wanted to watch you realize it. Mallory's hand flew to her mouth. Derek finally looked at me, his eyes wide and wet and full of something I'd never seen in them before. Recognition. My mother slumped against the couch, a marionette with its strings severed. And my father just stood there, his hands trembling at his sides, a man who'd spent his whole life manipulating and maneuvering and bending the world to his will, and he'd finally, irrevocably lost. You'll testify, he whispered, more to himself than to me. You'll testify against your own blood. I'll testify, I said, for the only blood who ever told me the truth. They left in silence. No slammed doors. No parting shots. Just the soft click of the latch and the crunch of gravel under their tires as they drove away into the frozen dark. I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, the ruler in my hands, its brass edge gleaming faintly in the first pale wash of morning light. In the months that followed, the house was sold, the money restored, my grandfather's true will honored. My father was charged with fraud, though the sentence was light: probation, community service, a fine he'd barely feel. But he'd lost the one thing he'd ever truly loved, which was the belief that he was the smartest man in any room. My mother moved in with Mallory, and they spent their days marinating in a mutual resentment so thick you could taste it through the phone. Derek writes me letters now, tentative and stilted, trying to build a bridge out of splinters. I read them all. I answer none. And the ruler sits on my mantle, parallel to the edge, where I see it every morning when I wake. It doesn't measure inches anymore. It measures something else entirely. Something that doesn't lie.